another video. Today our topic is Izzet Delver or Delver of Secrets as a kind of shell in Izzet Tempo. And before we start with our deck guide or take a look at the deck which we are running today, we want to make just a quick overview about the state of Izzet Tempo in general. And I think for now we have at least 4 iterations which you can play. I think it's really good to start with the stock build or the traditional build, which is just a classical Izzet Delver deck which we are running today. We take a look further into the tweaks of this configuration later on, but the classic build is just that you are running for Delver of Secrets. Maybe some decks run 3 or 4, but I think 4 is a really common sense, and 3 core steel cutter, and then you are left over with 3 or 2 flex spots. It depends on your land configuration, and those kinds of spots are often filled with a third Murktide Regent or a Brazen Borer or Force of Negation, Unholy Heat, and Preordain. The Preordain is really stock, so the 5th ponder is to speak. Whether you run an Unholy Heat, 1 copy or 2 copies, or maybe a Chain Lightning in those kinds of slots, it's really flexible, but you get the idea. That is the really stock configuration, which of the namesake card Delver of Secrets. And besides from this one, there is another iteration which comes with the new card Hexing Squasher, which is more, or traditionally speaking, a kind of combo card. It protects your spells, and the idea behind is that it will not protect your combo, but it will protect your creatures and make sure that your days and your force of will counter things. So for example, against a combo deck, maybe against oops or spells if they have a slow start, or against Sneak and Show, if you resolve a Hexing Squasher, you can make sure that your force of will can't be countered. And this is the main idea about this kind of configuration. And the second idea is that Delver of Secrets, with the rise of the mere tempo decks as a tempo deck of the player's choice, is often running 3 to 4 Orcish Bowmasters, and even with the rise of energy, and especially the Mardu energy, those are also running Orcish Bowmasters, that Delver of Secrets is not anymore the weapon of choice, because on the draw it's pretty bad. You play it and your opponent just plays a Bowmaster, which is at its own a really problematic card for you, and also clears a creature on the way. And this configuration tries to cut the Delver of Secrets and replace it with some numbers of Hexing Squasher, so maybe 2 or 3, maybe 1 in sideboard, 2 in sideboard. It is really interchangeable, but you get the idea of this configuration. I think the concept in theory is good, but I think in practical use you are upping the count of red cards, so your blue count is lower than usually, and your deck is getting a little bit clunky, because we are running 3 cutter steel cutter and 3 Hexing Squasher, so you are really 2-drop heavy, but you have to try it at your own if it's your style of gameplay. And the Squasher has also another good matchup or upside, because it's an inbuilt protection against Chalice of the Void, because especially pre-board you can't really interact with resolved Chalice of 1, and with the Squasher you can play 2 resolved Chalice of the Void, and Chalice of the Void is won by at least the Eldrazi aggro deck, maybe some configuration of the blue-red artifact deck. There are two builds, one with Chalice, one without Chalice, and against the configuration with Chalice of the Void, it's better. And also some configuration of Cloudpost are also running Chalice of the Void main, and also against Red Moon Stompy. But keep in mind, especially on the bigger colorless decks, they are shifting towards Twinisphere as a lock piece of choice, so I'm not sure whether this argument is any valid anymore. And also the Eldrazi aggro deck meta share is going down in favor of energy, and the energy deck is not playing any kind of Chalice of the Void, but I think, at least in theory, the Hexing Squasher can at least block a 1/1 cat, so it has some upside, but I'm personally not a huge fan. I think it's a really good idea, but I think you want either have Cutter or have Hexing Squasher, but we can try it out in another video or another one. But this is the second iteration, and then there's also a kind of new shell which is called Otter Cutter, or Cutter deck with Storm Chaser's talent. And the main idea is that you are trying to replace Delver of Secrets with your weapon of choice, and the weapon of choice is Storm Chaser's talent. So you get another clue with Boros Trigger, and the Storm Chaser's talent has another ability. So in the late game you can pay 4 mana and get back 1 instant or sorcery. So it's a kind of soft Tamio, so you can get back a lightning bolt or a force of will, so it's a pretty good effect in the late game. And the second argument is that you have a built-in engine with Boomerang basics, so it's just a bounce spell for 1 mana as a sorcery. So sorcery is pretty good because you have another card type for Dragon Rage Chandler. It's a blue card, it pitches to Force of Will, and the idea is that you can bounce your Storm Chaser's talent to get a card draw, another token, and some value on the line. And you can also bounce an opponent's permanent. You can bounce Resolved Barrowgolf, you can bounce Murktide Regent, but you can't bounce Resolved Chalice of the Void. So that's the main hook with this deck. So Chalice also shuts you down, but in theory this deck should be more streamlined, more aggressive, because you are not relying on maybe the flip, whether you ever will flip or not, because you can control the prowess triggers. And we will play this deck after this video, so I recorded already the run, and you will see the second video of this kind of iteration for comparison. I think whether you play this variant or the other, I think often it does not make that much of a difference. It's basically the same archetype. It's a kind of style preparation, a kind of matchup spread. I think both decks have their arguments. I think maybe the Storm Chaser's talent is a little bit stronger on paper, but I think it will not make the difference between an 8-0-1 and maybe going 4-4, for example. But this is the third iteration, and the last iteration. And the last iteration is a really old deck, as to speak. And this is one of the earliest builds with Izzet Cutter. There's also no Delver of Secrets. And instead of playing 3 Cutter, you are playing 4 Cutter. And you are cutting 1 Murktide Regent. And you are playing 1 Tamio. And with those kind of gaps in your deck, you are trying to fill those gaps with double Preodine, double Unholy Heat, and 2 Stifle in form of interaction. So the idea is that you can just play a fetch land and pass, and can stifle an opponent's fetch land, for example, or have some inbuilt protection against storm or oops all spells, because with stifle you can negate both oops creatures, so the activated one and the triggered one. So it's a really handy card. It plays a little bit bigger than the Delver or the other variant, as to speak. I think it's also handy. It's a little bit outdated, as to speak. It has fallen off of favor, but I think it's also a good configuration to keep in mind. Main deck of this one, we are playing a really traditional Delver of Secrets build. We are playing 4 Delver of Secrets, not 3, not 2, we are playing 4. And traditionally you play 19 lands. In this configuration you will only see 18 lands. The main reason is I replaced the 19 land with a Force of Negation. And then you just have the typical 1 Brazen Borer, 1 Preodine, and the flex card is the Unholy Heat. You can play 1 Chain Lightning, or you can play 2 Preodine and 1 Unholy Heat, or the other way around. Those kind of spots are flexible. I'm choosing here just for running 18 lands, because I'm thinking 18 lands is enough, especially with a basic island. And keep in mind, we are a tempo deck. As to speak, we are playing 4 Bauble, 4 Ponder, and 4 Brainstorm, and we really need just 2 lands to operate, maybe 3 lands with a cutter. I think it's fine. You can make an argument for playing it safe and playing 19 lands, but I'm thinking it's worth the risk, because with this configuration we can play at least 1 Force of Negation main, which is a good card in certain matchups. It's good against combo, against storm, for example, or against lands. You can counter a Life from the Loam or an exploration. It has some utility, I think, at least as a one-off in the mainboard, and with this swap in the mainboard we can make some room in the sideboard, because the sideboarding guide or plans are really difficult with the Izzet deck, because traditionally you run some numbers of Consign, some numbers of Hydroblast, and some number of Pyroblast, and then some artifact removal in form of Meltdown or Nullrod, and then you have your graveyard slots in form of Surgical Extraction or Gravedigger's Cage. But with the rise of the Boros Energy deck and the Cradle control decks, and also the slight uptick in Death and Taxes, we really need 2 more slots to play the a kind of creature removal card in form of I think Fire Magic is the best weapon of choice. You can clear with 1 against tokens, and you can clear on 3 with all so-called bigger creatures. You can also play the Tumble. The Tumble deals 2 damage to non-flying creatures, but then you can't play it maybe against the artifact deck where the tokens fly, for example. I think Fire Magic is overall a fine card, but you need 2 more slots to fight against those fair creature decks, and we really have to find slots to fit those kind of cards into, because here I'm cutting 1 Force of Negation because it goes into the mainboard, and I'm cutting 1 Pyroblast. I'm thinking the matchups with Pyroblast is the only matchup to notice Izzet Tempo, and then you often only want 2, not 3. And against Sneak and Show, that's the biggest matchup where you really want a third Pyroblast, but the upside is that it will improve your creature matchups. And as you noticed, I'm running here a Braid and Meltdown as a kind of cover it all protection, because against some matchups you want Meltdown, against some kind of Forge variants, or some kind to clear all Saga tokens, for example. And in certain matchups you would just want a Braid, maybe to kill an Aether Vial or some white creature, or against Eldrazi to kill a creature or a Chalice of the Void, because you do not want to bring in Meltdown against Eldrazi. So I really often can't decide whether I want to play a Braid or Meltdown. So I'm thinking putting both options in your sideboard is fine, but you really have to make this space. And I also want a second Unholy Heat. I think it's handy against tokens, against Izzet Tempo, and I really want at least 2 Consign. And I really like the split for now to play 1 Nulrod instead of the third Consign, because the Nulrod is really good against all Storm variants, and I think a Nulrod is always a good or a fine sideboard card. And I really want not to miss out on a Price of Progress, because you will run into a lands matchup on the long run, and you need at least 1 silver bullet against those kind of deck that you can play towards as a kind of an out. For the graveyard cards, it's really depending on your style. I like the Surgical Extraction. The upside is clear. You can play a Cutter and play a Surgical Extraction, and also it gives you some kind of protection on turn 0 against Oops All Spells. So there's a huge upside in Surgical Extraction, and you can also board it in against some lands or Loampox matchup where you really want to remove Wasteland or maybe Life from the Loam from the graveyard. But on the other hand, Gravedigger's Cage is also a good card against Cradle Control, because it will shut down all natural order effects and all Green Sun Zenith effects, and also against some other matchups or some kind of classical reanimation lands matchups, or against Storm, it's also fine. So I really like the split to have 1 Extraction and 1 Cage, so you lose some matchup percentage, but I think overall you have at least always a silver bullet in your deck. It's not those kind of sideboards with a lot of one-offs are not everyone's cup of tea, I know, but it's a good way to build your sideboard, because often you do not want to change out 8 cards. You want to change maybe 1 Force of Negation, or trimming some cutters down, and 1 Unholy Heat. So it's fine to just put in 1, 2, 3 cards per game, and I think it's a good sideboard configuration. It's not the best one, but I think for now it's a fine configuration where you do not have some lack of deck which you can't cover really, because if you trim down on Fire Magic, you really lose some percentage against creature decks, and if you cut down your Price of Progress, your lands matchup will feel much worse after boarding. A Braid will improve your Eldrazi matchup and maybe some kind of creature matchups. Meltdown is really critical to have, I think, to clear against Forge or against maybe Black Saga Storm. I think Meltdown is really a critical card. I don't want to go out to a tournament without it, and this is my sideboard configuration in a really long explained way, but I hope you understand my thoughts, and maybe you can agree or have your own opinion, but I think it's often critical just to make some understanding why you are putting some cards in your sideboard and what is your expectation. And for this configuration we really need to swap in one Force of Negation in the main and cutting one land, and we will keep an eye whether this land cut will hurt us in the one, or whether we can really stay healthy with 18 lands. So, welcome to round 1 of our one. We are on the draw against an unknown opponent. Our hand is decent. We have protection in form of double days. We have a threat in form of Dragonwitch Chandler, but we only have a Volcanic Island, so we are a little bit soft to Wasteland. Our opponent is leading here with Volcanic Island and Ponder, so it could be either Sneak and Show or maybe a Mirror Match, we will see. And we are searching here for some kind of lands. We found a Wasteland which could be handy against Ancient Tomb, but our opponent is leading here with Dragonwitch Chandler, but our Wasteland has some utility in a Mirror Match, and we are drawing a basic island, so our land base is pretty much covered for the rest of the game. And now the grinding starts. We are getting here, or trying to get rid of, Dragonwitch Chandler. Our opponent is really aggressively forcing. Luckily we can use our days. This will set us back on a land drop, but either way the Dragonwitch Chandler got the Delirium, so our days was not enough. So I didn't catch this one at the first try, but we will continue our play and lead with our own Dragonwitch Chandler. But we have not now Delirium, we have to wait a little bit. But the matchup is not as fast as long as there's no Cutter or Murktide in play. So a single Dragonwitch Chandler we can handle down the line. And for now, we just want to chip no damage in because we play our Core Steel Cutter. And if we, as to speak, flip our Dragonwitch Chandler, we want to make the trade, because the trade will favor us, because then we have a Core Steel Cutter remaining. But our opponent tries to Lightning Bolt here, our Dragonwitch Chandler. We have our second days, and we'll use it for this one. So we have a force as a kind of backup for maybe a Murktide Regent, but our opponent has another days, so I'm not willing to force over it, because I'm thinking we really need to get just our Murktide on the battlefield first and counter an opponent's Murktide or Brazen Borer. Our opponent has to attack here, so I think we make the trade. And our opponent is playing his Surveillant again, and from this point we just need to lead with our Murktide Regent, and hopefully our opponent has no days left. Then we are incentivized to force, but we'll see whether the Murktide Regent will resolve. So no days from our opponent's side, and our opponent is leading here with a Dragonwitch Chandler. Keep in mind the gap in the life total, 18 to 14 from our side of view. And here we have the decision what we want to put back. I think days is fine, one force is also fine. We have a shuffle available with another fetch, and here I'm going not to attack because I really want to get more value in the mirror match, and I want to kill the Dragonwitch Chandler, as to speak, for free. Maybe our opponent has a Lightning Bolt, but then it's a 2-for-1, and we have the opportunity to daze the Lightning Bolt, which is also a really favorable trade. And the mirror match is all about trading resources. Our opponent has 1 land and 3 hand cards remaining. We also have 3 hand cards remaining and have 2 more lands and a better threat on the battlefield. So the game should be pretty locked from this point on. There's not much how we can lose this game. Maybe a Murktide into Murktide from our opponent, but we just play it out. and our opponent fetches here, goes for the basic island, and leads with a Delver of Secrets. We don't care. Second Delver of Secrets, it's fine. They have to flip. Our opponent has no option to manipulate the top of his library, so no bauble for our opponent. We are going to waste and just attack because the Delver of Secrets have to flip, and we have one lightning bolt remaining. So maybe if he's greedy and is just holding one back, we can trade. And I'm going here for the lightning bolt in the upkeep because our opponent revealed a Force of Will, so that we can get rid at least of one Delver of Secrets before our opponent draws the known Force of Will. So he has to jump block here and cannot trade the Murktide Regent, and we follow it up by a Dragonblade Chandler. I'm just going for the Brainstorm. I think it's not really necessary. I think just keeping the Brainstorm in hand is fine. We have Force and a random blue card. It's all we really need from this point on. I think both ways are fine. Keeping it back or searching up for more pressure. We found here a Delver of Secrets. It's a kind of pressure. It will not matter that much. And our opponent concedes the game. For sideboarding, we want to move out or side out as many hard counters as we can. So Force of Will goes out. We want some kind of blasts, as to speak, 2 Pyroblast and 1 Hydroblast. Unholy Heat is also fine. I'm also considering here 2 days for at least one Abrade and maybe some numbers of Fire Magic, maybe 1 or 2. I think both are fine, and because I think they have some kind of value, but I'm not exactly sure because Delver has to flip at least. So I'm just going not for boarding those in. I'm not really familiar how Fire Magic is in the mirror match. I think versus the other variants with Otter, you can bring them in, but versus a classical Delver, you have a really small time window to play it. So I'm maybe more considering it on the play than on the draw. And as to speak of the Devil, our opponent has a Delver of Secrets, which failed to flip. So pretty good for us. And our opponent is leading here with a Ponder, so not a really strong start, at least for now. And from our side of view, we have next turn Delver of Secrets, also with also a bauble. And interesting, our opponent uses his bauble in his turn, so he's not quite familiar with the mechanics. He wrote in the chat he's a new player, so he's likely to learn those kind of interactions, but we do not make those kind of mistakes. We play our bauble and waiting to flip our Delver, and now the Delver flipped from our opponent, so he will get in for 3 damage and is leading the damage race. And keep in mind, we both have our basic island in play, and our opponent is deciding to keep his fetch land open, maybe for some kind of blast effect or for just going for the surveillant. And here our bauble failed. We have to make a blind flip, and a Tunnering Force was revealed, so no luck for us. Our Delver didn't flip. And from here on, we want to deploy our second Delver, and first things first, we attack. Maybe our opponent is pyroblasting and not flip Delver, but our opponent doesn't go for it, so we play our second Delver and casting our Ponder to make sure that our both Delvers will flip next turn. And we find a bunch of good cards, Unholy Heat, Ponder and Core Steel Cutter. So we make sure we draw the Core Steel Cutter, and next turn we can go for Core Steel Cutter and Ponder. Besides that, there's an Unholy Heat underneath it. It can be relevant against the Murktide. I'm not planning to bolt the Delver, at least for now. But I think with the cutter in play, we might have to change gears because we are really behind on the damage race. So our opponent will get in here for 5 and puts us down to 12, to 9. And we really have to make some kind of board presence. So we are getting a little punished for the ponder. I think keeping the unholy heat would be the better option. But I think it's fine. We have to learn from this one. But at least for now we get 1 token. And we see our unholy heat. Underneath it's a Dragon Witch Chandler and a Daze. And here we want to draw the Daze to maybe prevent our opponent from casting a Murktide Regent, which would be really lights out for us at this stage of the game, or maybe a second cutter. But our opponent has his third land, so Daze is not active, at least for now. And here comes bad news, Murktide Regent. We have at least an unholy heat, maybe, but I think we do not have Delirium now, so we can't really deal effectively with the Murktide Regent. So good card, but no value, at least for now. And here I'm just using our Daze to at least protect our token and get some value out of the Daze, but we are really drawing dead for now. Our opponent is getting in here with Delver and both tokens, and I think we have to block here. We are trading 1 Delver for 1 Delver, 1 token for 1 token, and I think I want to keep the Delver so that we can at least maybe jump the Murktide, but keep in mind our opponent can just equip the cutter so that his Murktide Regent gains trample. And for now, because we blocked with the Delver, our unholy heat is online, at least for now, and we can hopefully kill the Murktide. Our opponent will not interact with this one, so maybe because he's also was boarding out his Force of Wills. And we draw a little bit land heavy here, so our opponent has 4 cards in hand and has an active cutter, so I do not think we really going to win the game. Our only out for now is drawing into a good brainstorm to change our hand and get at least some cutter action, but also our opponent has a Hydroblast for our engine, so I think we really have to draw well. Brainstorm maybe into a Murktide Regent could be a good out at this stage of the game. And our opponent will just for now overrun us with tokens. So even if we find a Murktide Regent or maybe a Brainstorm, I think our opponent will just overrun us with tokens. And here's the Dragon Witch Chandler, I think, which we knew about. I'm not exactly sure. Maybe we have had to shuffle here to find or increase our odds in finding a Murktide Regent. And our opponent is just generating more value with Brainstorm into Boros triggers and tokens. And I think we can concede from here. For the last game of the match, I really want to try the Fire Magic, and I'm boarding out 2 days for 2 Fire Magic, and hopefully we can at least kill 1 Delver of Secrets on the line. Our hand is not really aggressive, but we have some kind of long-term value. We have a cutter, a bauble, and we really want to hit a second land and maybe ditch at least some wasteland for now. Our opponent is fetching a basic island and is leading with Ponder. We are not going to Pyroblast the Ponder. We have to keep this maybe for a Murktide Regent or maybe a Delver of Secrets, we will see. But I think with creatures, at least for now, we can really good remove them. We have a Braid, Lightning Bolt, and maybe for a Murktide even a Brazen Borer. So with this in mind, I'm going to Pyroblast the Brainstorm, because Brainstorm is more often the better card as Ponder, at least with no land drops made. and our opponent leads here with a Dragon Rage Chandler, and here we have a lot of options. We can make a slow cutter turn, or as I decided, just kill the Dragon Rage Chandler, because the Dragon Rage Chandler itself will generate a huge card selection, so it will really help to improve those kind of draws, and every card drawn and the card quality will matter in the mirror match, because it's really about grinding, having the better answers, so we can't really afford that our opponent can improve his card draws. And here I'm also going for the Wasteland, because I'm thinking we really have a reactive hand, not an active hand. Even if we deploy our cutter, we can't hardly make a double spell turn for now. And here I'm going to daze the Brainstorm. It's not optimal because we have to bounce our own Surveillant, but it seems to be that our opponent is a little bit out of gas, as to speak, because he has no following up, no Delver of Secrets, so maybe he has searching for Murktide Regent, or maybe some cutter, I'm not sure, but at least for now we can deal with every threat in the game as long as we find another land, but it's just a matter of time. We have at least for now 16 life points, which is equals in time, so we have a lot of draws to find our second land, and our opponent plays a Bauble, so the Delver of Secrets will likely flip, and our own Delver fails. He just finds another body in form of a second Delver of Secrets. I think we will take it. It's better than nothing, and if we are lucky, both Delvers will likely flip, and we are really searching a second land. So keep in mind, if our Delver will flip, we are not likely to find our second land, so we are a little bit behind in this game, even if we were on the play. But we have to just play it out and hope for a second land, or maybe a fast flip of our own Delvers. And the Dragon Rage Chandler is also online. He has Delirium, and we will see how things go from here. And we find a Volcanic Island, which is good and bad news. Good news because we have our second land, bad news because our Delvers didn't flip. And from here on we have different plays. We can just play our Murktide Regent or lead with Core Steel Cutter, and I'm going here for the Core Steel Cutter because I want to see if our opponent has a daze and is willing to spend his daze, but he had a Hydroblast, so no clear indication of daze. And you can make an argument for going always with the best threat, but keep in mind we have 16 life totals. We can take at least one hit, so I'm thinking taking those kind of test turns to see whether our opponent has a daze is fine, because resolving the Murktide Regent is really important. After boarding it's often difficult because you often don't know whether our opponent has the Pyroblast or has the Hydroblast, and he's going here for the enchantment on a Delver, which is fine. It's the enchantment which will not go maybe on our Murktide, but it could also be indicating that our opponent has a second one. But from here on we are playing just a Brainstorm, searching our third land of the game, and I'm thinking a Braid is not good in this spot. Our opponent didn't have a Core Steel Cutter, and spending 2 mana for getting rid of one creature is not really efficient. And here we have to go just for the Murktide Regent to stabilize our board, and if we can stabilize, then we can next turn play Cutter and Unholy Heat and getting some board presence if our Murktide Regent will not get bounced or Pyroblasted. And we will see what our opponent has here. So bad news, he's playing the Pyroblast in his upkeep to hopefully flip his own Delvers of Secret. And interestingly, he fails to do so. So really unlucky from our opponent's side. Good news for us, it saved us at least 4 damage. And our opponent is here going for Lightning Bolt, our last remaining threat, at least for now, and is getting in for 5. We can at least block 1 Delver to absorb 1 damage, and taking 4, going to 8. Our opponent has 0 hand cards remaining, and we draw our sideboard card in form of Fire Magic, which is, I think, not optimal, but in this position it's maybe the nuts, as to speak. We can get rid of 2 Delvers of Secrets because they didn't flip all day long, and just have to deal with 1 remaining Dragon Mage Chandler, and the remaining Dragon Mage Chandler can't put us in board range, at least for now. We can absorb 1 attack and can clear it, maybe in form of Unholy Heat, or maybe in case of emergency with a Brazen Bower, or just bouncing it. Both ways are reliable, and from this point on I'm thinking just heating it now is fine. If our opponent was a Murktide Regent, we can bounce the Murktide Regent, and we just have to play it here really defensively, so that we don't lose to a fast big Murktide Regent. So I'm really patient here with the Brazen Bower, and I'm not going in flashing it in if it's not absolutely necessary. And we draw really dead, we draw a fetch land. So keep in mind, if we draw a Murktide of our own, we can just play it and attach it, so to give it haste. And here we are chipping in for just 2 and keeping, not playing the land because it will not change anything. Our opponent has a Core Steel Cutter, which could be scary, and his draw before was a Bauble, so he has a token active and is likely going to attack us. We have the option of blocking once with our Shutdown Delver of Secrets, and here I'm going to bounce the token, because I really don't want to get 2-3 life points, which is board range, and just taking some risk here and have at least 1 jump block with the Delver available. And we draw a Wasteland, so that we can a land, so that we can make a double turn. We have Brainstorm and can flash in back the Brazen Bower, and here I'm not going it in doing it in our turn, in case we need the Brainstorm to find an answer, and we can double spell in our opponent's turn. There's no need in doing it in our turn. The damage output will not change anything. Our opponent would be gone to 1 life, so it doesn't change the clock, and give us some kind of protection in form of Brainstorm to find any answer. And here our opponent has 2 cards remaining, and he only can cast 1 Lightning Bolt, or maybe 1 Pyroblast or Hydroblast. I'm not exactly sure. And with this in mind, we can just make our double spell turn and play the Brazen Bower from his adventure and block with the Delver of Secrets, and or with a token. It depends what our opponent is doing here. And he had a Pyroblast for our Brazen Bower, so the token goes to at least 3-3, and we can absorb the damage with the Delver of Secrets, and this should be enough to finish off our opponent. And with the Murktide Regent we can just make a double spell turn, play the second cutter, get some Browse Trigger, and the Murktide Regent is our second spell. You can even just play the Murktide Regent and equip it, it's the same outcome. It will not change anything, and that should be a game. So really close one, really grindy, but 1-0 for now in the mirror match. So we are moving on to our second match of our one. We are playing against, at least for me, unknown opponent, but our hand is fine. Here I'm going not for the basic island, because Delver of Secrets is a kind of pseudo protection against Wasteland, because you do not want to get wasted if your opponent has a threat in play. And therefore I fetched for the Volcanic Island, and our opponent is leading here with Underground Sea and Lotus Petal, which will mean Doomsday for sure. And we are going to force the Doomsday, and our opponent forces back, and so he made his pile. I'm just checking through the pile to get a clue what is remaining and how maybe our opponent built his pile. You can't really tell for sure, but at least get a guess how many Force of Wills are remaining, how many Edge of Autumn, and how many Cyclers he has. And here our hand is pretty bad, and I'm taking here the risk and just deploying our Dragonmage Chandler, and hopefully that our opponent at least has one fetch in the pile. So the Consider was not in the pile, as I remember, and our Delver didn't flip, so not so good as to speak. And so also our Dragonmage Chandler is really far away from getting to Delirium, and our really one remaining out is that our opponent is going for the Tassa's Oracle, with maybe one or two cards remaining in his pile, because here he has to shuffle. So he has maybe a random order, and indeed he goes for the kill with one card remaining, and we can luckily steal this game with a lightning bolt open. So really lucky from us. I'm not sure whether it was a construction error in the pile. I'm not that familiar with Doomsday piles in general, but I saw that the Consider was not in the pile. Maybe he's running a second Consider. I'm not that sure. And for sideboarding, you can make a whole sideboard map how you board against Doomsday, but it's always pretty interesting because you never know whether they change his or her game plan in bringing in some numbers of Bowmasters, Tamios, or Murktide Regent or Barrowgirls. So I really like to keep at least one Unholy Heat in the mix, and I'm not a fan of bringing in Force of Negation, because it's really not about that one, it's about pressure. You really want to fight against Doomsday on the battlefield, not on a stack. So it's not a kind of storm deck. So I really like to change just nothing with at least a classical Delver build. I think it's a good matchup in general. We have fast clock, we have some form of direct damage with lightning bolt, and we can interact in form of daze and force, and I think it's often enough to get over the finish line. You can get really cooked if your opponent boards in some high numbers of Barrowgirl, for example, or maybe an off-guard Bowmaster can catch you very well. So we have to keep this in mind. But with our land or hand configuration here, we are just deploying our threats and setting a clock to our opponent, so that he has to find or accomplish his Doomsday plan. And keep in mind that our opponent has a basic island, so he needs at least a Dark Ritual to play Doomsday. He can't play it with 3 mana, so keep this in mind. And here I'm really going aggressively with the Ponder just to flip our Dragonmage Chandler, and here I'm declined the Delver of Secrets and Dragonmage Chandler because I'm thinking we have 6 power in the air, it's enough. We really want to find some kind of protection, maybe these, maybe even lightning bolt, but that pressure was enough. So a really quick win against Doomsday. And we move on to our third match of the run. We are on the play. Our hand is fine. We have a basic island to start with, Delver of Secrets and Bauble. I think you are not incentivized to save the Bauble. We just need to use it. first of all to flip our Delver, and secondly to find maybe a land, but we have a ponder for this purpose, so there's no haste in finding a land quickly. We have ponder, we have even a daze if anything goes wrong, and our opponent shows us an Elvish Visionary, and here comes a Shepherd. So, bad news, we can't counter anything anymore, and we are up against Elves. So, against Elf, it's really tricky to play against because you have to keep an eye on the board state, so they can just overvalue you, and they also have some kind of combo outlet and can kill you really fast with a Gaia's Cradle and just a Shepherd, or maybe with a Green Sun Zenith, or maybe some numbers of Natural Order. So it's sometimes really tricky to play against Elves, and you really have to take them serious. It's a real deck, even if the play rates are not that common anymore, but there's even sometimes a big event, Elf will win, and then the Elf play rate will go up. And the game plan as a Delver player is just to kill a Shepherd, of course, so that our counters will be active. And secondly, just fly over the air. So Delver of Secrets is really handy. And the key to win the game is just finding a quick Murktide Regent. The cutter tokens will not bring you over the finish line. And our opponent has his engine unlocked. He can generate mana, he can bounce his Elvish Visionary, and his creature spells, or all spells which are green, are uncountable, and he even has a Cradle, so we can step on the break and just fetching the Cradle, and we find our Murktide Regent. So our game plan is just to waste, at least for now, the Cradle, and then get maybe a Murktide Regent, but keep in mind our graveyard is not that full, so I think we are just one turn too late. We really had to find a removal for at least the early Shepherd, or at least for now for the Hermit Druid, to cut our opponent off from the explosive mana generation. And here comes the second Elvish Visionary. So from this point of the game, I think it's really locked. There's not much we can draw. Even a Murktide Regent is just too late, because our opponent just can activate the ability of the Shepherd, and for I think 6 mana, and just overrun us. And there's nothing really we can do. Even if our Delver will flip, we need at least 2.5 more turns, so it's just over from now, and we just take maybe some knowledge time to see what our opponent is maybe running, what he's willing to show us. Is he maybe showing us a Natural Order or a Green Sun Zenith, so that we get a feeling how combo orientated is the build of our opponent. That's the whole purpose in not conceding for now, and just giving our opponent a chance to just complete his turn, to maybe get a view whether he will play a Natural Order or not. And maybe he shows us some Atraxa, I'm not sure. Often they go for the big green creature with Temple, and from this point on I think we can just concede the game, getting 1 more damage in for good measurement, and then we can just play here our cutter, but the game is practically over. And we'll see how our opponent is finishing the game, maybe by just activating Shepherd. We will see. Our opponent is here generating a bunch of mana, so it could be the Behemoth out of hand, or maybe a big Green Sun Zenith. For the Behemoth, we will see, and it's just the Green Sun Zenith. So this is our opponent's so-called combo engine. It's not really needed. I think he can just go for the Shepherd activation, For sideboarding, we have Fire Magic, which is really handy. It's not in the sideboard because of the Elves matchup. It's in the sideboard against Cradle Control and Death and Taxes and the Cat's Energy deck, but for sure it will really help against Elves. I think the split of one extraction and one cage could be handy because it's a cage matchup. The cage will protect us from natural order and some numbers of green summon Zenith. We have to take a mulligan. I think Brazen Borer is not that good, so we want to get rid of this one and leading with a Delver of Secrets. Our hand is a little bit slow. We are seeking for colored mana in form of Volcanic Island, and then we can start the game. Our opponent has for sure the Shepherd, and here I'm making sure that our Delver will likely flip. In playing the Brainstorm, we found a Wasteland, which is fine for now, and a Bauble down the line. So we stack the Ponder on top and play our Bauble just to get a draw deeper in our deck. And here I'm thinking it's fine to waste our opponent because the Shepherd will not accelerate mana. So our opponent is a little bit behind his planned mana curve, and the Shepherd is not a huge clock or cannot generate mana. And in the meantime, we can raise our opponent down with the Delver of Secrets, and our opponent plays here some mana creature, so he can tap I think two Elves to generate one mana, and a Quirion Ranger where he can bounce a forest to untap a creature. And here we are playing Ponder. We are really searching for fetch land or Volcanic Island to play our sideboard card in form of Fire Magic, which is excellent. It's a 3-for-1 trade, it's perfect, and we get rid of the Shepherd so that our Force of Will is online. And with this configuration, we can play next turn Murktide Regent. We have Delver of Secrets and Force as backup if anything goes wrong. So I think there's nothing how this game really can be stopped besides maybe an endurance from our opponent to stop at least Murktide Regent. But if it's not hardcast, it's not the end of the world. But next turn he can maybe play endurance, but it's just too late. We deploy our Murktide Regent now so that we have some kind of soft protection against endurance further down the line, because the endurance will trigger a resolved Murktide Regent and will just grow the remaining on the battlefield. And here I'm going to waste the Dryad Arbor. I know that he can bounce it, but I think in playing so it's just a huge tempo advantage because it cuts our opponent basically off of one land for one turn. So it's likely more just like a time walk or a free bounce. So the Dryad Arbor is not gone, but it's all delayed by one turn, and we have lethal on the battlefield. So I think it's a pretty good time window just to waste the Dryad Arbor to cut our opponent off of the creature, maybe for Cradle as a kind of land drop. And our opponent plays here the Symbiote, and we just will attack and kill our opponent. At least not killing. I think he goes to 1, but I think it will get the job done. So we play our cutter in case we need some form of trample, maybe equip our Delver of Secrets next turn, but it will not matter, our opponent concedes from here. So I'm really happy with Fire Magic. It's an excellent magic card. I really like it. I like the speed. You can make an argument for playing the Tumble sideboard card, but I think 1 mana is really handy in this kind of configuration. And for the final game, Our hand is a little bit on the slower side. We have no threat. We have at least one force, Cage and Wasteland. Wasteland is excellent against Cradle. But I think it's not a good hand to mulligan. I think you can do better, but you can also do worse than that. So at least we found the Delver of Secrets and the Bauble, so I think it's a fine start. And our opponent leads with Nettle Sentinel, so it's some kind of clock. And keep in mind, the Elves player does not need to make a combo. He can just clock you down with some numbers of Nettle Sentinel. It's a decent clock. And our opponent is going here for Queen some Zenith for 1. So I'm thinking he's really reaching maybe for some utility elf or a shepherd. And we are going to force this one and use our Bauble, hopefully to flip our Delver. So we do the known Volcanic Island and hopefully do a blind flip. And it was a good blind flip. We found Lightning Bolt, and here I'm thinking of Wasteland because I'm a little bit scared against Endurance, because our hand is really weak against Endurance. We can't bolt her down. She will or he will block our Delver. So I was here going for the Wasteland just to shut our opponent off from hardcasting Endurance, because we can't answer or interact with this kind of threat. I'm not sure whether our opponent has Endurance, but we have to play at least the best what we can and make sure that we don't lose the game. And here we find a bunch of Murktide Regent and a Fetchland on top. And I think it's fine in drawing at least the land, because we can surveil once. I think a second Murktide could also be fine, but it depends how long the game will go and whether our opponent has Endurance or not. And here our opponent fetched and failed to find a land, so I'm not exactly sure why. So maybe he has all lands in hand, or maybe it was just a misclick. I really can't say it for sure. But our opponent here has a really slow start, so there's no interaction, no acceleration. He's just untapping his Sentinel with the Quivion Ranger and playing his Symbiote. And I'm thinking I'm taking here a step on the break and clearing at least the Nettle Sentinel, because if our opponent finds a mana elf that he can't accelerate too hard, and taking some pressure off, because if you watch our live totals, our opponent was at 12 and we are at 13, and just by the clock of the Nettle Sentinel and our own lands. So we have to keep this in mind. So I'm thinking the Lightning Bolt is fine, but you can also make an argument for saving it. But the Murktide Regent was enough, and our opponent conceded from here. So for our fourth match of D1, we are playing against a known opponent. He plays a lot of energy, and no surprise, he leads with a Guide of Swords. And our hand is fine. We have a cutter, but we have no lightning bolt, so we can really get overwhelmed by the cat engine. And here I'm going for ponder and taking the second cutter, because the game is often about early board presence. But keep in mind, our opponent is able to use the energy and just fly over us. And here our opponent has the Ocelot Pride, so his engine is established and also is going to waste us. So not a good board presence from here. We really have to rely on the strength of our cutter, but I'm thinking with the energy now generated, the game is pretty much locked in place. and here I'm going to ponder. We find a board, we find a bauble, so at least we have some utility to use our cutter and maybe kill the pride. It depends on what creature our opponent is putting his energy counters, but he has a second cat, so our lightning bolt loses all his value, at least for now. And I really don't think we can recover from this. The Guide of Swords will just fly over us. We really need, for now, at least a Murktide Regent to stop the attack in the air. And even one cutter with one token, even if we can generate 2 tokens next turn, there will be likely no next turn, so we are just a little bit behind on curve. So why? Because we didn't find or had a removal for one of his 2 creatures, so either the cat or the Guide of Swords, and this costs us our game. And the wasteland was really crucial because it took us 1 turn off. We can here at least daze the swords to plowshares, but it will not change the outcome of the game. It's pretty much locked from here. But we can use this time to see what configuration our opponent is running. So he's likely not playing Mardu Energy. So there's no Plexine for now, so no Bowmaster, no Cable Therapy. So he's playing also additional Hexing Squasher. So we have to keep this in mind and can concede from here. For the sideboard plan is pretty straight. We want to board out all of our Force of Wills and getting in as much removal as we can. So Hydroblast against the Raptor or the Squasher, and Fire Magic. It's for this purpose in the sideboard. And we also want to bring in a Braid. A Braid is not a good card, but it's at least a removal for maybe Guide of Swords or the cat. It's better than nothing. Here we have to take a mulligan into a medium hand, I would say. We have a Bauble, we have a Hydroblast, it's fine, but it's not a strong hand, so we really have to rely on a slow opening from our opponent's side. And he's leading with a cat, and from here on we can surveil first to make an educated guess. We find a Delver of Secrets, and from here on I think it's a clock. We can keep it and have today's just a cat, and then play the Delver of Secrets with Bauble and our Volcanic Island. And we'll see what our opponent is playing here. So he's playing Hexing Squasher. I think it's fine for now. We have no days left. We boarded out the Force of Wills. We find a Lightning Bolt, which is fine. We can deal with a Squasher as a creature body on the line with Hydroblast and Lightning Bolt. And we have to deal with the Squasher not because of his ability. It's more because of the ward effect, because if we want to get or kill creatures with single target removal on the line, we have to pay 2 life, and this will stack up. So for now I think we can wait. We do not have to spend a removal spell at the Squasher for now, but in the long game we have to deal with it, because then later we can't pay the ward. And our opponent has here a Raptor, which is good. It would be a good target for just countering with the Hydroblast, but we can't, at least for now. And our opponent finds an Ajani, which is pretty bad news because Squasher and Raptor are red permanents. So if the Ajani will flip, his ability will create a token and also deals damage either to one of our creatures or into our face. So we have to pay the 2 life and get rid of the body side of Ajani and have to develop our game from here. I think we can chip in once more. Our opponent has 5 damage on the battlefield, and we have to find a threat on the line. So I think it's fine because we do not have that much good blocks available. Every creature will trade with our Delver, and here I'm just taking the bill and killing this Squasher because we can't afford it later more if we want to use the Hydroblast on maybe in countering or just getting rid of the Raptor. And here our opponent has a second Ajani, so really bad news. And here I'm really trying in desperation for seeking days, and we failed to find. We find a lightning bolt and a hydroblast, but those 1-for-1 removals will not win us the game because our clock is not enough to pressure our opponent. And here our opponent can use his Ajani at least once, kill our Delver of Secrets, and we have to fetch to clear the top of our library. We can Hydroblast, but we are dead in 2 turns anyways. There is no outcome what we can really draw. We can kill 1 creature, take 4, getting to 4, and then our opponent should have nothing and we have to draw a Murktide Regent, so it's not possible and we can concede from here. So 3-1 for now, and for the last match of our one, we are on the draw. We have to mulligan. Our hand is not that decent. This hand looks a little bit better. We can put 1 Dragonmage Chandler away. We have Daze, Wasteland, Brainstorm, Delver, and the option to fetch for a basic island. Our opponent is leading here with fetchland in form of Polluted Delta, and here we can make a decision in either going for basic island or going for volcanic island. And here I'm just making it really sure I really don't want to lose against wasteland, so I'm fetching here for the basic island, and our opponent is going for an Undercity Sewers and putting Reanimate in the yard. So it's not a Izzet Tempo deck, and also not a Doomsday player, and he's maybe some Rakdos Reanimator shell with the black red black surveillant, and he's putting collective brutality in the yard, so it's some kind of reanimation deck. I'm not sure. It does not seem that it's a turbo reanimator, so maybe just an like a Demir reanimation deck with a splash for red, for maybe some elephants. I'm not sure, but either way, we are just making sure to clock our opponent as fast as we can, even countering here the Dark Vigil and going for the Brainstorm at the end step. So not a particular good Brainstorm, but at least we found a Wasteland to shut our opponent off from his second land. So he has just a basic Swamp remaining, and he has no creature in his graveyard, at least for now. And he's playing a Cable Therapy, but he's targeting us, not himself, and he names Force of Will. Luckily we had no Force of Will, we have a better card in form of Daze, at least for now, and we play our Dragonmage Chandler and making sure to close the game as fast as possible. And our opponent seems to be stuck on mana, so our Daze is really live. Here I'm going for the Surveil. I think we want to let the Brainstorm stay on top, get in at least for 4, play during Red Chandler, and then we can daze and win next turn. So it should be pretty safe from here. And our opponent concedes. And for sideboarding, I think we want at least the extraction and the cage. And I think Unholy Heat can go out, maybe if our opponent brings in Barrow-Golf. I'm not sure, but our opponent just conceded. Okay. So at the end, if you make it so far, thank you very much for watching, and we will see us in our next video, where we will try out the Izzet Cutter variant with the Otter tokens and see whether it is better than the traditional Delver build or not.